Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you to the session, Business Delivers, Fostering Integrity and Combating Corruption Through Technology. Our regards and gratitude to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for providing us with this opportunity to be here discussing this important topic today. We will be discussing how companies are equal stakeholders in anti-corruption and transparency, along with government and civil society, and how government actions can create an enabling environment for business success, with an emphasis on combating corruption and the role of private sector as stakeholders and co-creators of the rule of law. Besides the political nature of corruption, there are so many promising innovations in areas like behavioral sciences and digital technology, opening new opportunities to fight corruption along with the private sector, a key ally for governments in the road towards achieving integrity through technology. On that note, I would like to greet and introduce our panelists today, Gervase Warner, President and CEO of the Massy Group of Companies, and Susana Sierra, CEO of BH Compliance. Gervase has been President and CEO of the Massy Group since 2009. Massy is a historic Caribbean company which does business following a code of ethics to safeguard their reputation for integrity, committed to ensuring high ethical standards in business activities and conducting business with honesty and respect for the law and their values. Susana is a Chilean businesswoman recognized in the compliance industry for her work on integrity, anti-corruption, transparency, development of organizational culture, and implementation. Ms. Sierra is the CEO of BH Compliance, a global company that offers an innovative tech platform to monitor corporations' best practices and ensures the process created to prevent corruption is correctly defined and implemented. It is my great honor to be here with you today. So without further ado, I have a question for both of you about some of the opportunities that the private sector sees for business and governments to promote the region's competitiveness through greater public and private sector integrity. Susana, can you share a few examples of that?
Okay, perfect, Claudia. First of all, we know that we are facing historical talent. The context is changing. We are facing the war, the post-COVID, and especially in America and in Latin America are really different, unstable context about politicians, about corruption, and a lot of things happening in the continent. But when we talk about corruption, we usually think in the public sector. But I'm sure that corruption to happen, you need two. And a lot of times there are companies on the other side. And so I'm sure and I'm really convinced that if all the companies and all the private sector are together, collaborating to fight corruption, but first of all, saying no, following the processes, and being together fighting corruption, they could ace the corruption and the corrupt people, because it's not like countries are corrupt or companies are corrupt. There are people inside governments, inside companies that are like the bad apples, and we need to ace them. And at the same time, for companies to work in this field, it's not just the legal area or the compliance area. They need to understand that they need to be part of the values of the company, the purpose of the company, and follow that and measure that. So the answer for that is like the private sector has an important role, but they need to understand and listen that they have a role, and it's not just saying, no, always there are the politicians and we don't have anything else to do because the other ones are the bads and we are the goods. No, we are all together fighting corruption.
We all have a very important role to play indeed. So Gervase, what are your views on that?
Well, I very much so agree with everything that Susana said, and certainly representing the private sector and Massy in this context, I think we have to realize that corruption is a transaction between a corrupted entity seeking to gain and a corrupted entity that seeks to actually gain some favor by making some form of payment or favor. And so, you know, it's not possible for corruption to exist in a public space unless there are corrupt actors on both sides. And corrupt action exists everywhere, right? It's an incentive to avoid headaches. It's an incentive for personal gain. It's something that has a lot of, say, human behavior and dynamics behind it. And so to really combat corruption, I mean, it's not like a ethereal thing that's out there, corruption, like, no, it's real. It's real, and it's really people behaving in particular ways. For us at Massy, business integrity is absolutely essential. And so I think that part of how you go about doing this is elevating the conversation around honesty and integrity and making that a fundamental value. And also making sure that there's leadership, because, you know, quite frankly, people will follow what the leader is actually spending a time and attention to. So if there's corrupt activity, and you know, if there's fraud, there's little things that happen in companies all the time. If that goes undetected, if that goes unprosecuted, it continues to grow. And it's the same in governments. And so a lot of people will say, well, you know, we don't believe in corruption, we don't stand for it, et cetera, but where's the leadership example in actually making sure that something happens? So Luis Amargo talked about the lack of confidence in democracy. A big part of what happens with corruption is that it goes unchecked. And so unless, and certainly in a business organization, we all know people, we run supermarkets, and people will steal you blind if you actually do not have systems to detect where there's pilferage, where there's shrink, and do something about it. Well, you know, countries are not any different. You know, corrupt apples, bad apples, will steal you blind if you don't actually have real processes in place to detect, and then you do something about it. When people see examples of prosecution, they gain confidence. Democracy stands a chance.
That's right. And now let us go deeper into Massy Group's approach for cultivating a culture of compliance and ethics in its operations. In what ways has it shaped your company's relationship with the public sector?
Yeah, so it's very important. I think that in the context of the countries in which we operate, people just know that, well, these guys are not going to be involved in any form of corrupt activity. It's just, we don't get asked anymore. We just have that as a standard, right? And that's not to say that you don't have a few people who are trying to do something, etc., but people are very clear about what we stand for. And they're clear about what we stand for because when something happens, you know, we will do something about it. And so, I mean, in response to your question, this is not an easy thing to embed in the culture of an organization. So we actually spend time having business integrity roadshows where we bring people, experts, people who have, you know, actually succumbed to corrupt activity in corporate life and tell the story about being part of a sting operation and being put away in jail and for little simple things. And so people could begin to understand the slippery slope of, you know, doing somebody a favor, you know, I scratch your back, you scratch mine, and then it ends up in something that your conscience now tells you that this is a really bad thing. But you've come so far that you almost have to go ahead with it. And that's to help our employees understand that, you know, you really have to be on your guard all the time. So if you are interested in doing something like that, you're going to invest in that type of activity, that type of training, that type of engagement. And I attend many of them myself. So people see that, well, that's important. The group CEO, well, I guess this must be an important thing. So let's pay attention and make sure we show up and participate, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And Susana, we are so proud to say that BH Compliance is at the frontier of corporate compliance, having recently announced that its platform would integrate blockchain and artificial intelligence technology to enhance monitoring of ethical business practices and prevent corruption. So congratulations for that. And can you share what existing technologies can be harnessed to promote business ethics and integrity and strengthen public accountability? Can you share about the cutting-edge technologies in your industry looking to next?
Right. Before talk about that, this is important to know about my history. When I started working in anti-corruption, specifically with the private sector, the answer that I had all the times is, no, but we are not corrupt. And that is because nobody thinks that is corrupt, and that is true. And a lot of companies said, okay, but we are not worried because we have a big compliance area and a legal area, and we are complying with the law of our country. But what happened after? When we start, what we do is like measure that all the policies and procedures are really being complied. Because when you don't measure, then you don't see results. So it's like invisible. It's like Gervase was saying, it's like a term. You can't actually see what is happening. And when we start measuring, we realize that a lot of policies and procedures, specifically big companies, have a lot of paper compliance. And for example, policies to meetings with public functionaries or to pay suppliers or donation policies, they were written, but they weren't following the processes. So we started growing with technology, like giving visibility, because the good thing about technology is you can be transparent and you can tell how companies are doing business. For me, compliance or integrity or the way, it's more about complying with the law or have a lot of manuals and ethic codes and everything, but it's about how companies are doing business. And today we are talking a lot about that, talking about sustainability and ESGs and everything, but we don't want to talk about anti-corruption, and that is like the heart of the G of ESGs. So we need to have visibility of how companies are doing things, and that is what we are doing with technology, through artificial intelligence and also through blockchain, like generating evidence that the companies are doing the correct thing, and even if they are not doing, it's good to know it.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes nobody wants to see when they are not following, but sometimes it's because that procedure and that policy was obsolete. With the pandemic, that happens a lot, with a lot of manual processes, and then companies start doing things different way. That doesn't mean that you are going to be corrupt because you are not following your policy. But a lot of time what happened is that then you start like getting messy, and it's really difficult to control. And if you can't control, like Gervase was saying, it's not just have it there. You need to see, you need to control, you need to monitor, and that is what new technologies are helping to do. So now there are not excuses. It's not like before that you said, no, but I have all that paperwork in, and it's impossible to read and to process. No, now it's there, and specifically after COVID, that a lot of companies go like 100% digital with processes. It's really easy to do it.
Great, and before we close this great conversation, Gervase, what's the call for action? What are some opportunities for companies to get more involved in supporting a culture of integrity that builds trust among the public and private sectors?
I think it's absolutely essential for private sector companies to have a declaration around integrity, ethics, and that they back it up with things like what Susana is talking about. Because you can't really know how you're doing if you don't have processes for detecting, if you don't have ways to measure whether people are complying with the processes that you set in place to make sure that things are done right. So declaration, start measuring, take action.
Anything to add to that?
Yes, adding to us, all companies, they are not companies, they are not buildings. Companies are people, and people with values and with a purpose. And all companies have a mission. And now we are facing a disrupting world, and specifically we are in a time which all the companies need to think again how they are going to survive for the next 10 years and what is going to change. And I think that it's very important to keep that purpose and that values in all the processes and the systems inside the companies. It's not just like I have an island here with a lot of nice words, but then I'm acting in a different way. So I'm sure, and I really believe in this, if companies really follow what they have in their values, in their purpose, in the way they are doing things, is going to be a real change. And we need that change now to increase the trust that is really lacking at this moment in the world.
Completely agree.
Thank you very much,
100%.
and thank you not only to the panel, but also to the audience for joining us today.
Thank you all.